Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. Over the last few years, especially during moments of political unrest, global violence, economic instability, one question keeps coming up in my DM conversations and in my coaching calls with my clients. And that is, Christina, how does anyone still have the energy to show up online in these unprecedented times? And when they ask that question in particular, there's usually a pause that comes after, followed by, it's all too much, and I don't know if I could keep doing this. And yes, I'm here to validate everything that you are currently feeling in this moment. Yes, it is all too much. Many of us do not have the energy to show up online or to show our faces on camera almost every single day. Many of us do not have the energy to market and sell when it feels like the world is crumbling or when we see our communities constantly being attacked. We also don't have the energy to always be online, especially when we have real-time access to so many injustices that are happening in our world. We do not have the energy. But what we do have is we have to keep going because the bills do not stop. We have lives to live, businesses to run, mouths to feed, and we have to keep going and try to find some joy because joy is the most revolutionary act of resistance that there is. And many ask that question because what they're really asking is how to be a human first while also being a CEO and a service provider all at the same time. There are many nuances of how to be values led without becoming emotionally depleted and how to lead without lying to ourselves. So if you've been asking that question, especially in the most recent days of 2026, if you've been watching people post like nothing is happening and often feeling confused, irritated, or ashamed that you don't have that same energy, this is what this podcast episode is all about. In this episode, we're having an honest conversation about what it really means to stay visible when the world feels extremely heavy. I'm sharing how I think about showing up online during political unrest without bypassing the realities or betraying your values, and how I coach my clients through guilt, fear, and exhaustion that often surfaces in moments like this, and also how to lead online in a way that feels steady, responsible, and true when you do not have that endless energy. It's 2026 and yeah, we're not living in neutral times. There are wars happening that are not distant headlines for many of us. There's political unrest that directly impacts our nervous system, our families, our rights, and our businesses. We saw the elimination and cuts to diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2025, get instability, and an unspoken pressure to stay positive while people are quietly bracing themselves. And for Latinas and women of color founders, there's another layer that doesn't get talked about enough. That expectation to be professional and not be too much. To speak carefully because everything that you say on the internet often stays on the internet. To not offend because people will then unsubscribe and unfollow and not want to work with you. Newsflash, if they do those things, then they were never your people to begin with. To not be too political because you're a business owner, so you should be staying in your lane. Here's another newsflash for you. Business is political. Every single policy that is shaped and created from a local to state to federal often affects business owners, especially if you are a woman and a minority. From access to capital, to healthcare, to childcare, the list can go on and on. So yes, business is political. To not be too emotional and to not disrupt and rock the boat. All of these tensions alone is super exhausting. So when someone says, I don't know how people still have the energy, what they're really saying is, I'm tired of pretending nothing is happening. I'm tired of feeling like silence makes me complicit and speaking up makes me feel very vulnerable. And I'm tired of carrying responsibility with no roadmap. Like I said earlier, most of us do not have the energy. We're not floating through the season powered by inspiration, discipline, or just our content strategies alone. We're showing up because we have businesses to run, clients who rely on us, families to support, and lives that do not pause simply because the world is heavy. And this is where leadership actually begins because showing up doesn't require pretending. It does not mean bypassing the realities, and it does not mean sacrificing your integrity just to stay visible. This is what I often see with my clients. Most of the clients I work with are Latinas and women of color founders earning multiple six figures. And the conversations behind closed doors sound very different than some of the content and messaging that you see online. Many of the clients that I work with are saying things like, I don't want my silence to be misinterpreted, but I also don't know what to say and fear of saying the wrong things. Some of those conversations often also talk about how many are scared to speak up at a time like this. Many are afraid to lose clients, and they're just exhausted by the expectation that everything needs to be worded perfectly for every single crisis. And underneath all of that is the real question. How do I lead without fragmenting myself? Leadership during instability is all about being anchored. Your audience does not need you to be a perfect commentator. What they're looking for is signals. They want to know who they most align with and also who they could trust in unstable times. Let me take you inside my own process for a moment. I've had to learn how to implement this framework in my own business since 2020. There have been many of days, many of them in 2020, 2022, 2024, all of the election cycles where I do not want to post because my nervous system is already holding so much. I'm reading and taking in all of the real-time news. And I'm thinking about my community. I'm thinking about what it actually means to be a Latina leader in this political climate, not in theory, but in practice. And at some point, I've had to confront a truth that was very uncomfortable but necessary. If I only know how to show up when things are easy and calm and convenient, then my leadership is conditional. And conditional leadership doesn't hold in moments like this. And at the same time, I refuse to build my business on denial. I have a personal principle that I come back to again and again, which is I will not bypass reality for the sake of optics, and I will not exploit pain for proximity. I don't trauma mine. I don't rage post, even though sometimes in the moment I'm trying so hard to calm myself down. I don't turn suffering into content just to prove that I care. But I also don't disappear. Instead, I lead from integration. That means I allow what's happening in the world to inform how I'm going to show up without letting it hijack my voice or fragment my sense of self. And I feel so many of us respond from a direct emotional reaction because we are emotional when things happen and we have just an easy way to actually post what we're feeling in real time with the click of a button. Instead, I take a breather for a second before I decide how I'm going to show up. That doesn't mean not showing up until it's perfect, but that just means understanding my how and my why. A framework that I like to use that I often teach my clients is what I like to call values-led visibility. This is where our maturity comes in. It's really important to know that you do not need to comment on every single headline just to prove that you care. And you do not need to turn your brand into a 24/7 news channel. Sophisticated leaders have boundaries. Values-led visibility means that you choose what aligns with your values, what intersects with your lived experience, what is relevant to your community and the communities that you serve, and what actually would be responsible for you to speak on, especially when it comes to being an ally for other communities. That decision alone reduces so much exhaustion. The second part in that framework is separating values from performance. And this is huge. Speaking up does not require a perfectly worded post. It does not require you to be crying on camera, and it does not require you to be educating your audience who are not in good faith. Your values are not proven by how much emotional labor you give online. Sometimes leadership looks like naming what you stand for simply and clearly, and then returning to your work and doing the work, actually practicing what you preach. Because your work is also a contribution. You are allowed to care deeply and continue building your business. You are allowed to market and sell. Selling is not a betrayal of your humanity, and it is not selfish. Providing for yourself and your family is not a moral failure. In fact, for many of us, especially women of color, economic power is part of justice. Which leads me to the third part of that framework, shifting from content creation to signal sending. When energy is low, our output should go down. Clarity is the one thing that should be going up during in that time. That means fewer posts, but more intentional ones, more anchoring statements, less noise, more of your presence. A single grounded message that says, this is where I stand, this is how I'm moving, and this is what I'm going to be doing to continue to build in the way that aligns with my values. That is leadership. If you're feeling tired, conflicted, or quietly feeling overwhelmed by the question of how you show up right now, I want you to know that nothing has gone wrong. This isn't a motivation problem or a discipline issue, and it's definitely not a visibility failure on your part. What you're experiencing right now is the collision between leadership and our reality. And that collision requires a different kind of support than just be consistent or post through it. Here's what I notice that happens for a lot of founders in moments like this. They start to confuse their internal exhaustion with the external obligation. They tell themselves, if I don't have the energy to show up in the way that I constantly am doing, something must be wrong with me. And slowly, without realizing it, they start outsourcing their authority to other people on the internet. They look around and think, well, if she's posting and they're selling and everyone seems to know what to say, then there is something wrong with me. And instead of listening inward, they start overriding themselves. And this is where leadership fractures. So before we talk about what to say or how to show up, I want you to come back into your body for just a moment. Ground yourself and ask yourself honestly, what is my system actually holding right now? Grief, responsibility, decision fatigue, caretaking, financial pressure, all of that right now is taking up space and isn't allowing you to really dig deep and figure out how you should be showing up. And when your system is full, it's asking you to produce clarity on demand, which is super unrealistic. High-level leadership starts with capacity awareness. This is something that I coach my clients on consistently, especially during unstable seasons. The leaders who sustain themselves are not the ones that push harder. They are the ones who learn how to adjust their output without abandoning their authority. That distinction matters more now than ever. So let me walk you through a mini coaching exercise that I love to do with every single one of my clients who often has this exact tension. The first thing I would ask you is, where are you forcing yourself right now? Forcing is the tell. It shows up as overthinking your messaging, rewriting your captions and statements 10 times, avoiding posting altogether, or posting something that technically sounds right, but feels really off in your body. It's telling you that you're trying to perform clarity that you don't actually have just yet. And when that happens, the answer is not to push through and show up. The answer is to pause and recalibrate. Instead of visibility being about persuasion, it becomes about your presence. Instead of trying to convince, explain, or prove, it is important that you must anchor yourself. I want you to really sit with this next question. What if you stopped trying to say the right thing and focused on saying the true thing? Sometimes the most responsible thing you can say is simple, grounded, and unfinished. Sometimes it's naming what you're holding without resolving it publicly. And sometimes it's saying, this matters to me and I'm continuing to do my work with integrity. Now let's talk about the part no one wants to say out loud. Many of you are navigating fear around your business and making money right now. That fear gets tangled up with values in a way that creates shame. You start to think, how can I sell my products and services right now when all of this is happening? Because none of that matters in a world that is unjust. Or sometimes you start thinking, is it wrong to focus on my business when so many people are suffering? And I want to be very clear here because this is where a lot of leaders quietly self sabotage. When you shame yourself for wanting stability, you cut yourself off from the very thing that allows you to lead sustainably. So the next question that I would ask you is, where have you internalized the idea that struggling publicly is more ethical than being grounded privately? Those beliefs don't come from anywhere, and they're not serving you anymore. Leadership in 2026 is not about being everything to everybody. It's about being regulated enough to remain trustworthy. And this is where your audience is watching you. Even if they've never commented or liked your posts, they are looking for a grounded leader that can lead them through unstable times. They are watching how you move when things get hard, when you do speak up and when you don't speak up. And they're watching whether you disappear, panic, over explain, or anchor yourself. They're learning from you on how to navigate their own lives, whether you intended that or not. That's why showing up differently still counts as showing up. If you're feeling like your voice has changed, that is not a problem. It means that you're evolving. And sometimes you need to let more space between posts, and that's okay. That's what we call discernment. And sometimes, too, as you evolve, your audience that came with you is not the same audience that's going to continue to be with you. And that is okay. It is okay if people unfollow, unsubscribe, or just don't feel aligned anymore. You have to anchor in your truth. Now, I want to ask you this next question, and I want you to just take stock of how it makes you feel. Imagine for the next 30 days, you stopped asking, what should I post? And instead, you start asking yourself, what do I want to stand behind? That question alone changes your posture and it moves you from reaction to direct leadership. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is struggling with being visible right now in these unprecedented times. And send me a DM on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe and your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and the offers and the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I'll personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.